Before the Rings of Power, there were the Silmarils. Before Sauron, there was his master Morgoth. Before Aragorn and Arwen, there was Beren and Luthien. Join us as we explore Tolkien and all the ages of Middle-earth with your hosts from theonering.com, Jonathan Watson and Michael Grumbine.
Happy New Year, Michael.
Happy New Year to you and everyone listening.
Yeah, it's another year. This is our 1, 2, 3. Started in 2022. This is our now fourth year of doing Exploring Tolkien. It's been crazy. It's been 4 years. And once again this year, just so you guys know, like we have that Noel video that we put out a few years ago, and every year it gets a ton of new views, and it's just so cool to see people discover it. And the sum of its part is greater. The sum of its part is greater than of its parts is greater than each one separately, and which is great because like his voice, Austin's voice, the music, the visuals, how it all came together, it just worked out so well. So I'm always really proud of that. And so like another 20 or 30,000 views this year on it.
Austin's work is awesome, and it's so interesting to me how you have like something so small that it affects people so much, or maybe we're just fooling the algorithm and it so shows it to more people. That's also possible, but it's it's from a attention getting perspective.
Yeah.
Although I just got this funny, like the algorithm is a funny thing. A member of the wedding party of one of my newest son-in-law just sent my family this screenshot that it recommended the One Ring to him.
Oh,
and
good.
Specifically our dialogue from like 2 years ago
what?
about whether Lord of the Rings is a Christmas story or not. So randomly, there's that.
That was I repurposed that for YouTube. I put that up. That was an extended edition, and I put it up on YouTube so that everybody could listen to it from a couple years ago, where we actually did talk about that.
Yeah, because you made a short out of it, right?
I did. Yeah, I made a short out of it, and I've been doing more shorts. So little clips from behind the scenes from the Lord of the Rings films, and also from some of our episodes, and even some of our extended edition podcasts, which you can
Good
get
thing
to.
We have you.
Yeah, well, that's what my kids say, but then they don't really mean it.
They will. They're young. They'll learn.
Day. Hey, it was Christmas, and I did get two Christmassy things from not Christmassy things, two Christmas gifts from the Lord of the Rings or from Tolkien or something like that.
So I got two as well.
One was that. This was the Tolkien calendar. This was my little thing, my New Year's Eve edition. I get one kind of every year if they do it. This year's Alan Lee, and there you can see it's Glorfindel and the Balrog on the mountains.
One of the coolest scenes,
encircling mountains of Gondolin. And it's so funny when I got that, I said that to my family. My in-laws were here. We did that on Christmas Eve, and they were all like, "What?" It's like, how do you? I'm like, guys, you just don't understand. Like, this is who.
Look, it would take too long to explain. Just smile like you care.
And then what's funny is on Christmas morning, my wife gave me this, which is The Fall of Gondolin. I didn't realize I didn't have an actual hardcover. I just had the Kindle version when it came out, like 12 years ago, I want to say. So I got the hardcover, which is great. And I said, hey, I bet that picture is right here in the book because they have that. And sure enough, I was like, look, see, it's the Balrog and Glorfindel in The Fall of Gondolin.
Yep.
The same picture.
Yep.
So anyway, that was kind of funny.
Yeah, I really liked it. I got that book a couple years ago from my wife as well. This year, just accessories. So my background behind me is I got that in a large computer mat form, so it goes all under my keyboard, under my monitor, under my mouse.
That's awesome.
It's a huge like desk-sized version of this, made of mouse material, like slippery with the rubber backing, and it's really good quality. It's really nice, and so I sit here and I do work, and I stare at Harlingen and other such places that are on my map. So anyway,
I need to get that. I need to find that. That's really awesome because I use a big mat too on my desk because it's so much easier than having to worry about like where my mouse pad is. I can just use it wherever. Yep. So yeah, all right. Now I'm adding it to my list. I'm going to find that.
And then I got a Tolkien sweatshirt, which is always awesome.
Like a picture of him smoking?
No, just that stylized initials of his, and then a map of Middle Earth on the back as an outline. I needed a sweatshirt, and my kids listened to me.
And that's the kind to get. Absolutely.
That is, 100%. Yep. it's either Tolkien or Chesterton or cigars or something along those lines.
All of those work really, really well.
Mm-hmm.
Really, really well. Well,
there was a short years ago by Matt Walsh, and he was saying, like, look, you just have to understand every guy has 3 types of things that they like for Christmas. You just have to figure out what those 3 things are for whichever guy you're.
That's right.
And then you just buy within those categories. Don't get creative. Don't try to figure something new out. Just find them the 3 categories they like and buy something in one of those.
Yeah, you just don't want that little thing that sits there on your desk. You feel like you have to have it there because it was given to you by your family, and then you're like,
Gift.
I really just don't.
Especially with I mean, look, from that criticism, I exempt personal art of my children. That I will always, I'll always take that.
Absolutely, 100%. Yeah.
But besides that, just figure out, just get me something that's Tolkien related, Chesterton related, or cigar related, and I'm good.
Are you hinting to all our listeners what to do? No, I'm joking. Because what's funny is we're only asking you guys to become members.
That's right.
Of Exploring Tolkien. You can become a member at theonereader.com/member or theonereader.com/Patreon. The first month is free, and we'll have just held our latest chat. It's January 5th. I think it's coming up. Let's see. Yeah, January 5th, Monday night. We're going to be doing it. So if you remember, you'd get the email with the Zoom link, and you'd join us, and it'd be a great time, but you're not. So why don't you go to theonereader.com/member, become a member, or theonereader.com/Patreon, become a Patreon member, and join us there, and then get the extended podcast. This week, it is probably our final episode on The Hobbit. We're doing The Quest of Erebor, which you saw because you read the title. But we're finishing it in the new year. We started it in 2024. We did it through all of 2025, and now we're into 2026. And then we're going to get into some more, changes in the films, the complete list of film changes that we go through. We've gone through like 35 of them, so we're going to do another score.
320.
Oh, geez, yeah. We'll be here when we're 75 doing these. So, yeah, but you can get that. You can get the extended podcast. And get access to our Discord chat and our monthly in-person chat too, all for only $4, guys. It's pretty amazing. Special thanks, of course, to Quewt, our MVP, and Lynn and Rich, our sponsors, who go above and beyond in order to make sure that this podcast keeps going. I just got the bill for StreamYard. That's another $420 down the drain. So,
you mean bending spoons?
Yeah, Bending Spoons, the new company. All right, we won't get into that. This week we are finishing with The Quest of Erebor, which is the ultimate retroactive connection to The Lord of the Rings for The Hobbit. It is and you'll hear us use that term retcon, right? Tolkien was forced to connect The Hobbit to The Lord of the Rings. So he had to retroactively go back to The Hobbit and figure out what would have happened in order to properly connect us to The Lord of the Rings. And so he wrote The Quest of Erebor. Erebor, of course, being the Lonely Mountain. And so we'll jump into that. Before we do, of course, completely, though our Hobbit fact is going to be directly related to this, we do have to do this.
Hobbit facts.
Okay, did you know, and Michael, I know you knew because we discussed this before we started the podcast, that there are actually three written versions of, or 3 published versions of The Quest of Erebor. The first published one, and the second longest, is in Unfinished Tales. This came out in 1980, and it's complete. It has pretty much everything in there that we'll get to the longest version of it has, but it is not the original version, right? The original version of The Quest of Erebor came in. It was published in 1996 in the Peoples of Middle-earth, I believe, under Durin's Folk, and it is relatively brief compared to the others. It is not very long. I don't think there are any additional details in it. It's just something that the original version, which Christopher Tolkien discovered through all his father's crazy notes, and published in 1996. Now, the most complete version, which I believe is version B, right? Which is, so version A is the... How did they put it in here? Version A is the Unfinished Tales version, right?
No.
Version A is the Peoples of Middle-earth version, which is the short version.
No, it's not even that.
Oh, see, now this is why we're doing Hobbit facts, so I get my facts straight.
All right, I'm going to help you with this fact. You usually carry the weight on these Hobbit facts, so I'll add
convoluted.
I'll add my 2 cents. basically from the beginning there was an original draft. Christopher Tolkien did not know about it when he about that original manuscript when he published Unfinished Tales. So what he did know about were three versions, which he called A, B, and C. A never got published. B was published, and we're going to be going through it in this thing. Whoa, it's my green screen is killing it. Oh,
awesome.
wow,
Here,
look at that. Look at that. It's like a One Ring version.
It's slowly disappearing through the screen.
It's disappearing from view.
That's so cool.
Anyway, so the Annotated Hobbit has version B. And then what Christopher Tolkien knew about, he called C, he published in the Unfinished Tales in the 80s. And but with he had some passages from B.
It's chronological ultimately, like the way A, B, and C are, right? A is but the real, so the published version is A is in Peoples of Middle Earth, it's the shorter version. B is the longest version, which was published in
okay, hold on. Actually, A was never published. So the unnamed version, which I'm going to call version 0, just like patient 0
okay.
So version 0 was published in Peoples of Middle Earth and later on, because it was unknown by Christopher Tolkien. Version A was never published. It was just to my knowledge anyway. That's what
okay.
The version B was published later in full in this Annotated Hobbit, and version C with some passages from B were published in the Unfinished Tales. So there are basically three published places that you can get this story. The first, the earliest version is from Peoples of Middle Earth, which and that's the shortest version. The second place you can get a version is this book, The Annotated Hobbit, which has version B, which is the longest version. Mm-hmm. And then there's version C, which is in the Unfinished Tales. And version A hasn't been published to my knowledge. It was the bridge between the earliest manuscript and version B, which we're going to go over today. Yeah. So anyway, it's all very complicated. It's all part of the crafting and literary process. I think the thing that's important today for our Hobbit Fact is we're about to cover the longest version of this story, version B, the quest of Erebor, rather.
Right. And to make it clear, like this isn't something you sit down and like, hey, I'm going to go read the Quest of Erebor. And then like you'd say The Hobbit, Lord of the Rings, Children of Hurin, Fall of Gondolin, all those things, you'd be like, I'm going to go and read that. This is sort of like you have to go and seek it out. Now, if you have the Annotated Hobbit, it's there at the end, and it's actually, it feels very complete, at least in this version.
Right.
There's a lot of details given here. And since a lot of you haven't read it, probably, since you have to have Unfinished Tales and you have to have the Annotated Hobbit in order to read most of it, even the Unfinished Tales version, I read through that first, and then I went to the Annotated Hobbit, I'm like, wait, this is a lot longer. A lot longer. It's probably 30% longer with a lot more details about what Gandalf was thinking. So I'm going to give you, and Michael, you can correct me, and you can add detail. I'm going to give you sort of an overview just to give you an idea of how how this flows through it. And also real fast, it's not, this is, when he wrote this, it's not like the Silmarillion, which was written over 50 years. He wrote this, I think over, I want to say it was like a year and a half or so, when he was writing it for to get it to have it added to as appendices, but they never did in the Return of the King. So he wrote it over after the Fellowship of the Ring was published, and the reason they know that is because in the earliest notes he does reference page number in the Fellowship of the Ring. So
and so
54, I think, is what they said.
To be really nerdy about this, what I will add to what you just said by saying I consider what the version we're about to read, we're about to cover anyway. I consider that version to be just as much canon as the published Lord of the Rings. And the reason was because he wanted it to be published in the appendices, and it was only forced out by the publisher. So he had it all ready to go. And he, in fact, tried a couple of times to shorten it so that he could get it published. So this is even more canon than some of the stuff in the Silmarillion, because the Silmarillion, while it's, in a way, it's pretty canon because it was the final version that it was the best and most complete of the stuff that Christopher could cobble together. But Tolkien himself never published the Silmarillion, and this should have been published. So that I find this very fascinating because there's some really cool stuff in here that kind of like Gandalf talks about himself as a Olorin briefly, which is very cool. and talks about how he's not. He says basically, Allura and I was in the West that is forgotten, and only to those who are there shall I speak more openly. In other words, and that's all you get, folks.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a whole nod. He uses the word, "This is what I knew in my waking mind," saying there's a whole lot sort of going on behind the scenes, and I think that's hinted at too in some of the ways that he feels like Bilbo should get involved. But let me talk this through here, and it's going to be a little bit of a longer recap, and then we'll go through it in more points of what we thought. As we read through this in greater detail. All right, so Tolkien writes, by beginning, he tells us that Thorin is living in Erebor at the time, in the, as he says, the fair halls in the mountain, and he was still longing for the lonely mountain. He wanted the treasure and bliss that was there, and he was thinking on ways in order to gather armies, to create weapons, to forge new weapons, and have alliances. There was anger, right? He wanted to get back to the lonely mountain. And after this, he had a chance meeting, or through this, he had a chance meeting with Gandalf on the road in Erebor on the way to Bree. They rested there. He asked for Gandalf's counsel because he thought Gandalf was I think he uses the term a famous character or something along those lines. He calls him famous, I believe, in here. And so Gandalf agreed to come to his hall. This is where then the narrative shifts a little bit. And we get to a discussion that Gandalf and Frodo and Gimli and Pippin and Merry, I believe, are in a, quote, fair house after Aragorn's coronation, and they're discussing things, and Gimli comments that he wants to go to visit the Shire, because that's where all this started, right? That's where the downfall of Smaug started, and he wanted to see what that place was like, to kind of like come full circle. And he comments that Gandalf is the weaver of these events, and poses a couple questions to him, and Gandalf says he just doesn't know the answers. And what's kind of clear is that, he realizes he's changed as Gandalf the White, and he says like that all of this was meant to happen. That's all he can say, and that even he was meant to guide them. And he uses this phrase, which I love, and I think we'll go back to this here. I used in my waking mind only such means as were allowed to me, doing what lay to my hand according to such reasons as I had. And so he's like, well, it's the whole idea of providence, again, that we talk about many, many times, that Gandalf has a sense of like there's something greater going on, but his waking mind could only do what was there. Although I feel like now he's kind of saying I have more of a deeper connection to what's outside of my waking mind.
Yes.
Anyway, well, let me keep going on. So Gandalf, he says that he was concerned that Sauron would attack Rivendell or Lorien because he was already making some waves, and that the north was a really weak point in Middle-earth, because, of course, he had Minas Tirith down there with the defense. And so going north seemed like the strongest thing, particularly probably because of the Gundabad orcs that were up there already, that he could call on. So he persuaded the council to attack Dol Guldur before Sauron attacked Lorien, and hoping that this would cause Sauron to take a step back, but he didn't. He essentially went whole hog into Mordor, and within 10 years, he proclaimed himself Sauron, and he's back, and you guys better be careful. And then what's interesting is he shifts the narrative into like, this is now what Gandalf starts talking about, like why the Shire folk appealed to him. And he talks about the long winter and how their hardiness, their community, their ability to essentially stay together and to survive in these difficult times endeared them to him. But he was concerned because they were so isolated that they were the way he says it is they were beginning to forget their own beginnings and legends, forget what they had known about the greatness of the world. It was not yet gone, but it was getting buried. The memory of the high and the perilous, which I thought was a really interesting phrase. The memory of the high and the perilous. When you forget your past, right? Who are you really? You have no foundation anymore. And so he wanted to kickstart that a little bit, right? He wanted to start an ember burning let's get this memory of the high and the perilous back. And he says he needed somebody that had a dash of a took and a good foundation of stollider sort, Baggins. So he knew he needed something to kickstart that. And it's at this point then that he meets Thorin, and he sees him in his fair halls, and he tells him, Thorin tells him his desires to plan to retake the mountain, but Gandalf is not comfortable with that. He's ill at ease. He doesn't feel like that's a great decision to go take on the dragon head on, right? It's not going to work out. And he says, all I could think of was Bilbo. I could not get Bilbo out of my mind after Thorin told him this.
Mm-hmm.
So something about this story that he knew that the approach of arms wasn't going to work, and that Bilbo was foremost in his mind as the solution. And though he tells Thorin, open war is going to be completely useless against him. This is an absurdly difficult task, and that an absurdly difficult task is going to require an absurd solution to the problem. It's precisely what he says, an absurd solution to the problem, which is Bilbo. Because the way he couches it in logical terms is that, look, a dragon's going to smell dwarves. Hobbits are much lighter on their feet. He's going to hear the dwarves coming. He's out looking for dwarves in the mountains still. He makes the point he's probably still scouring the mountain for any remnants of dwarves left. And so...
Right. No doubt, although he doesn't say this, no doubt Smaug knows of Dane and the Iron Hills nearby. So there's probably a concern on Smaug's part. The dwarves are going to come back and try to reclaim their gold.
Yeah. And so he tries to convince them to accept Bilbo there, and he tells them about Bilbo and like how he's got like silver spoons and like nice plates and furniture and a big larder, and I think it's Balin that says why he must be a thief, because how else essentially dwarves believe that, like, how else could a hobbit come by nice things? And so this kind of sets Gandalf off, and he says, why, yes, a professional thief, of course. How else would a hobbit come by a silver spoon? I will put the thief's mark on his door, and then you will find it. But that doesn't, his sarcasm is lost on the dwarves at that point. And so they keep calling him a professional thief, and he just kind of lets it keep going. He never naysays their improper attribution to Bilbo. And so he arrives at Bag End, and he's kind of shocked at how Bilbo's a little too comfortable. It's not quite who he remembers. Bilbo, he remembers Bilbo's wanting to go on more adventures, and Bilbo's a little bit more of a homebody at this point. But he knows that they can leave no second thoughts for Bilbo, so they push Bilbo out really fast. But this makes the whole experience with Bilbo makes Thorin angry with Gandalf. But Gandalf, seeing this here, essentially this is now forecast. He's predicting what might happen to Thorin, and Gandalf says to Thorin, curb your pride and your greed, or you may fall at the end, though your hands be full of gold. And this is also like Gandalf is so sure that Bilbo is there that he tells them, if you persuade this hobbit to join you, you will succeed. If you do not, you will fail. So he's essentially saying you have no choice. Like this is the only solution. And it's not like he's being hyperbolic in order to get a rise out of him, in order to force him to make a decision. This is what he feels behind his waking mind, as he said earlier, right? This is something that he just knows, that there's some providence involved in this decision that feels right to him. And so...
Yeah, it's fascinating to me how many little details about hobbits and compliments that he gives, but they don't add up to enough evidence for him to come up with the plan that he comes up with.
Yeah.
And so the thing that, like you said, he just is very attached to this idea of Bilbo, and he's sure that Bilbo is needed for this. What the plan eventually amounts to, as you and I talked about in The Hobbit, is something very childish, at least from the outside, which is, we're going to take someone who the dragon won't be able to recognize by smell. We're going to take him all the way to the mountain. We're going to use the secret door with the map and the key I found on what it turns out to be your grandfather or your grandfather. Thorin's grandfather.
Yes,
so
that's right.
He's going to take him, and they're going to bring this hobbit, this magical hobbit that somehow is going to find his way, and then they're going to steal something from the dragon. Like, basically, that's the plan. And that's when Thorin gets, like, the greed kicks in. He's like, ooh, I'm thinking about the things of his hall. And so Thorin, the gist of this whole story is really interesting to me, because Thorin takes a lot of convincing, and the big argument that you were referring to at the end apparently takes place the night of that, after they've met him in Bag End, after Bilbo goes to sleep.
Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So it's still on the knife's edge whether they're going to have Bilbo go with them or not. and Gandalf is arguing with Thorin, and because Thorin at that point says, "Thief," he snorted, "he is as honest as he is silly. His mother died too soon. And anyway, many of the spoons were tin. You are playing some strange game of your own, Master Gandalf. I am sure you have other purposes than helping me." And to which Gandalf, in his usual fiery way, says, "You are quite right," I said. "If I had not other purposes, I should not be helping you at all. Great as your affairs may seem to you, they are only a small strand in the great web." So anyway, Gandalf fully admits it. Like, yep, you're small picture of this, but you need Bilbo to survive. And I think this is a beautiful retcon. Because Tolkien has to do a thing which is almost impossible. He has to connect a very simple and childlike fairy story to this grand epic, in the words of Gandalf, the high and the perilous, right? So he has to take this Hobbit story and somehow connect it. And so he does this beautiful job of Gandalf, like fitting a lot of those pieces together. And also at the same time, if we note, the dwarves in Gandalf's, well, at least Thorin, in Gandalf's story here, The Quest of Erebor, are much more like the dwarves of Middle-earth, of Lord of the Rings, rather, than they are dwarves of The Hobbit. They're very, like, Thorin is continuously, he has this high pride of the king. And so like Gandalf, when he comes back and has decided to help the dwarves, for example, says, "What have you got to say?" Thorin asked as soon as I came in. "This first," I answered. "Your own ideas are those of a king, Thorin Oakenshield, but your kingdom is gone. If it is to be restored, which I doubt, it must be from small beginnings." So Gandalf is here weaving this tale, or Tolkien through the mouth of Gandalf is weaving this tale by which many of the events of The Hobbit, and especially the setup of the dwarves seeking to overthrow the dragon with a very childlike plan, can make some sense. But ultimately, Tolkien realizes that they don't actually make full sense. Like, you can't actually, no matter how good Gandalf's reasons are about the dragon not being able to know what Bilbo is, and Bilbo having skills the dwarves don't have, ultimately there's no solution to actually killing the dragon. Okay, there's no
plan ever put out.
He doesn't talk about Gandalf doesn't talk about like Bard or some descendant of the kings of Dale or anything like that, and no warriors. He doesn't suggest they get help from Thranduil or anyone else. It's just this, and so ultimately, and he knows this, and he's musing about it to Gimli, and the sense that you get, and it's very clear, is that this is providence.
Yeah,
Gandalf knew that he didn't understand how, but Bilbo was the key to making this small part of the plan succeed. And it was a small part, because let's be real. Why did Gandalf want Smaug gotten rid of? Was it because he had pity on the dwarves? Well, yeah, in part, and he says so. But mostly it's because he doesn't want Smaug and Sauron hooking up. He doesn't want them connecting, because he said that Sauron would use Smaug against the dwarves and the elves, and against Lothlorien. And we were left to fill in what that means with our imagination. But essentially, this is part of Gandalf's plan to take down Sauron again. Obviously, the largest part of his plan is what he does off screen in The Hobbit when he leaves them after Beorn, which is the assault on Dol Guldur and the driving out of the necromancer, who is Sauron. But we don't see that in The Hobbit. We just hear that he's done it at the end. So this whole quest of Erebor is a side note for Gandalf, but it's a providential side note. It's a side note that he doesn't exactly understand why he's so convinced that this is the way, but he's sure of it. And so he's going to use Estelle. He's going to use that sense of hope that is beyond all reason. And of course, he has no inkling whatsoever that Bilbo is going to find the One Ring. That's something that's utterly beyond his wisdom. So, which is exactly what Providence does, and it uses Bilbo for that purpose. So I love this retcon because it's a wonderful connecting bridge between the kind of silly dwarves of fairy stories that we see in the Hobbits to the noble dwarves, and the high and perilous dwarves of Middle Earth, of the Lord of the Rings. And it's a connection of the story itself, and it explains a lot of things about this weird, like, why did one of my first questions when I was young, and when I reread The Hobbit for the first time, was, if Thorin's this king and he's been living in the Blue Mountains of Ered Luin and he's got this, he's a king in exile, but he's got a community of dwarves. Why on earth is he only taking 12 dwarves with him to go reclaim his kingdom? And so Gandalf is there to explain that Gandalf told him it has to be a stealth mission, and you're not going to have an army. An army wouldn't do you any good anyway. But you got to use stealth, and so there's that element, and the whole element of why he chose Bilbo to go with, that Gandalf explains more of, like you talked through. It's just it's kind of a beautiful little retcon, and it gives us a lot of cool details about the mind of Gandalf, and specifically the mind of Tolkien, in the way that he's connecting these two. He even tells us cool things about the Hobbits. He said, he told Thorin when he was losing his temper with Thorin, he says the Hobbits are an old race, and they were trading with your people and the elves 1,000 years before you ever existed. So it's Tolkien telling us a little bit more about the Hobbits than he does directly in the rest of the Lord of the Rings. But it's kind of cool. I like this exercise in retcon. This is the right kind of retcon.
Yeah, and it's because what it is he keeps the themes of the Lord of the Rings alive, and he sort of even retcons that a little bit more into the Hobbit. Not that it's not there, but even more so. So I think the phrase when it comes to the thematic connection to the Lord of the Rings, when Gimli asks him in the beginning, to find the ring and bring it far away into the west for hiding, and then choose the ring bearer, and to restore the mountain kingdom as a mere deed by the way. Was that not your design? And Gandalf doesn't answer. He's thinking. He stands up. He looks out of the window, and then he turns and he says, I do not know the answer, for I have changed since those days, and I am no longer trammeled by the burden of Middle-earth as I was then. In those days I should have answered you with words like those I used to Frodo only last year in the spring. But such measures are meaningless. In that far distant time I said to a small and frightened hobbit, Bilbo was meant to find the ring, and not by its maker, and you therefore were meant to bear it. And I might have added, and I was meant to guide you both to those points. To do that I used in my waking mind only such means as were allowed to me, doing what lay to my hand according to such reasons as I had. But what I knew in my heart, or knew before I stepped on those grey shores, that is another matter. And then he goes into saying, like, Olorin I was in the west, and that is forgotten, and only to those who are there shall I speak more openly. And there's so many points in this story where he knows that he has this feeling about the hobbits. He knows there are these steps guiding his way, just like sometimes you have like why did I make that decision? I don't know, but apparently it was the right one. And it's not just like you follow your gut. There's a greater hand guiding your way, just as we saw that in the Lord of the Rings when it was Bilbo's hand that stayed his pity, right? Pity that stayed his hand. Or was it pity? Was it maybe more than pity that even stayed his hand? Those sorts of things. And I think that is I feel like that is the greatest connection. Like, we can make connections here because he connects Dol Guldur very specifically, because Thrain II has the seventh ring, and that's why he's in Dol Guldur to begin with, and that's where he gets the map, that's where he gets the key. So all these sorts of things that are retroactively connected factually to the story that work really well. But I think the meaning of it is sort of like an even bigger retcon. Like he's really making the point here.
Right. Yes. And it's I love the fact that he distinguishes between what he knew in his waking mind versus what he knew in his heart. Mm-hmm. And to be fair, Gandalf the White, who's now answering the question, says, look, I don't know what was in my heart back then. I was a different person, essentially. Mm-hmm. Turns out resurrection has a certain effect on people. In Middle Earth, because he was resurrected. He died. He said so plainly, and he was called back. So and there's so many other, his encounter, of course, with Aragorn and Legolas and Gimli and Fangorn Forest tells you that he's a different person. He doesn't even remember some of the details about them. So it is an interesting thing that well, he says his mind was trammeled by Middle Earth. In other words, it was burdened.
Yeah,
Like he had been here so long that his spirit was weighed down in a way that his spirit currently is not. What I find fascinating, of course, is that you can't take like you can almost hear the glee in his voice as he recounts how angry he was getting with the dwarves, with Thorin back then. Like he brings it up over and over again. He himself doesn't seem to have the kind of temper, like Gandalf the White doesn't have the temper that Gandalf the Grey had, but he's, at least we don't see examples of him getting angry. But he does have these, but he does recall his anger very well. And he says over and over again how he was irritated at the dwarves' stubbornness, and he kept railing at them to stop being short-sighted, stop being so foolish, stop dismissing people just because they weren't working according to the way dwarves thought they should work, and etc. So, like he even points out that the dwarves presume that only dwarves can make things of value.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean that speaks like to the pettiness of the dwarves that we've experienced in The Hobbit, and that's a retcon right there into what they think of Bilbo and how they treat him throughout the whole thing, right? Where they don't respect him until he decides what they're going to do, and then they fall again into this whole like disrespect toward Bilbo one more time.
Right, exactly, and they eventually get respect by the end, but it took some doing.
Yeah, and he's not like you said. These are more the dwarves of the Silmarillion, or the dwarves. I mean, we only really have one dwarf in the Lord of the Rings, but these are more the dwarves of the Silmarillion than they are the dwarves of the Hobbit.
It's really true. I mean, Thorin himself is like way more angry. Like he challenges Gandalf quite a bit, and the way he talks to him is very unlike the way even Thorin of the Hobbit talked to Gandalf, most of the time anyway. And I love, though, the passage which presumably did take place. Well, not presumably, it took place in this conversation between Gandalf and Thorin in Bilbo's house while Bilbo was asleep, after they had met him. And the thing that turns Thorin, because he just does not think that the Hobbit is worth anything and worth taking or anything else. And he says, and even after the passage that you read, where Gandalf warns him to curb his pride and his greed, or he's going to fall at the end. Tolkien writes, Gandalf the White says, he blenched a little at this, but his eyes smoldered. Do not threaten me, he said. I will use my own judgment in this matter as in others. So this is a proud Thorin. And Gandalf gives one last statement, which he says finally was like the straw that broke the camel's back, and it convinced him. And it was of his own care and love of Bilbo. And he says, I will not argue it further. I have said all that is needed, except perhaps this. I do not give my love or my trust lightly, Thorin, but I am fond of this hobbit, and I wish him well. Treat him well, and you have my friendship to the end of your days. And Gandalf says, I said that without hope of persuading him, but it was a good thing to say. Dwarves understand and approve devotion to friends and gratitude to those that help them. Very well, Thorin said at last. Have your way. He shall set out with my company if he dares, which I doubt. But if you insist on burdening me with him, you must come up too and look after your darling.
It's like, yeah, the dwarves are not like. What's funny then is, again, like none of this is Thorin's doing. He's still just following along. And now, again, he was, I think, 24. I think they said when Erebor was taken. So he's never led anybody really much at all. So has he been a leader of dwarves? Not so much.
No, he has the stories. It's really interesting. He did. I mean, he was at the Battle of Anubazar. He fought. But what's interesting is when Erebor fell, like you said, he was 24. It says so clearly in the text, and it said he was too young to bear arms. So what's interesting is 24-year-old dwarves are considered too young, right?
Didn't even Gimli say he wanted to go to, and he was too young? He was 68 or something like that. Where is that from? Was that in here? Or was that a note that I read? I remember that specifically. I don't know. I'll try and find
at the sack of it's just the second sentence that says, this is of Thorin. It says, at the sack of Erebor, he had been too young to bear arms, but as Anubazar, He had fought in the van of the assault, and when Thrain was lost, he was 95, a great dwarf of proud bearing.
Yeah.
So
yes,
yeah.
and Gimli was forbidden to join the quest to reclaim Erebor because he was too young, only 62. And that's in Unfinished Tales, not in here. That's in the Unfinished Tales version.
Interesting.
So yeah, the youth of a dwarf. I mean, how long do dwarves live?
300-ish.
Yeah. Okay.
But then up to 500 or 600.
So he was a teenager at most, Gimli, essentially, and 24, 25 is very young for him to.
It's basically a young child.
So one other point I want to make about this here, and then I want to go over the last paragraph in the chapter because it's sort of the final ultimate retcon that we can look at and what Tolkien says and does. And I love that what his goal was to restore the hobbits into a recollection of who they are really and where they come from and the greater world around them. And he did that with this. So he restored the hobbits because of this, Frodo ends up, restoring the world as well. But then the hobbits end up taking arms and defending their land, and they do something that's more high and mighty than perhaps the dwarves would have predicted that they would have done, knowing what they know about these farmers and gatherers that they look down on who couldn't even make silver spoons. But he also restores the dwarves, right, to their kingdom. So this one move of Gandalf, he restores the hobbits. He starts that process. He starts the embers burning again, and then he restores the dwarves into there in order to protect the north. So Gandalf has, the one thing we didn't really talk about yet is Gandalf has the map and the key for 91 years before revealing it. And he didn't even know what they were for a while until it finally occurred to him after speaking to Thorin what the key and the map were, and how Thrain was always talking about one of the seven, meaning that when he met with him, he didn't really fully, I don't think, at least in reading it, it seemed like he wasn't totally clear what one of the seven meant until afterwards he finally realized he meant, one of the seven rings. And that's what Sauron took from him, probably driving Thrain mad at that point.
Right.
And it's when the point which Tolkien says that Thorin finally agreed to the plan, he finally trusted in the plan, was when he took out the map and the key. Did he take out the key in Rivendell? He took out the map, right? And they could read the moon letters. And that's the point at which he says Thorin finally really agreed into coming along.
You see very clearly through Tolkien's retelling in the mouth of Gandalf how difficult it is for a dwarf to change his mind from something he doesn't want to do or he's reluctant to do. Thorin takes so much convincing over time to go along with this plan.
Thorin is never truly convinced, until the very end.
Until the end, right before he dies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's not. And what's funny then, again, after reading the Hobbit in such detail, is like he's never convinced, but it was never his plan to begin with. He never did anything. He all the action that takes place was outside of his own acting, right? He had all the answers. All the things that happened were due to Gandalf, were due to Frodo, were due to Beorn.
He had one part to play, and he died doing it, which was rallying the peoples in the Battle of the Five Armies. He was a rally point and did a good job saving them from ruin in the middle of the battle. And then that was it. And then he died doing that, or was grievously wounded.
Yeah.
So,
all right. Well, let's read the final couple paragraphs here because I think they're the perfect bow on the end of this here. Gimli says to him, Gandalf says, "The pride and the greed of Thorin overcame him in spite of my warning. But surely, this is now Frodo, but surely," Frodo said, "he might have been killed anyway. There would have been an attack of orcs, however generous Thorin had been with his treasure." "He might," said Gandalf. "Poor Thorin, he was a great dwarf of a great house, whatever his faults, and though the enemy slew him, the kingdom under the mountain was restored. Dane was a worthy successor. My strategy proved right. The main attack was diverted southwards, and yet even with his far-stretched right hand, Sauron could have done terrible harm in the north while we defended Gondor. Even Rivendell might have been ravaged if King Brand and King Dane had not stood in his path. When you think of the great battle of the Pelennor Fields, do not forget the Battle of Dale. Think of what might have been. Dragonfire and savage swords in Erebor. There might be no queen in Gondor. We might now only hope to return from our victory here to ashes and regret. But that has been averted, because I met Thorin Oakenshield one morning on the edge of spring, not far from Bree. A chance meeting, if a chance you call it. A chance meeting, as we say in Middle-earth. That final line, a chance meeting, as we say in Middle-earth. A chance, little words there, meeting. And it ties it all together. And so, like, imagine, if, like, Smaug had been able to come forth and become a player in these battles, like that would have changed everything. And so here's Tolkien saying, like, yes, this is how we're going to completely retcon Smaug and why this was so necessary into the Lord of the Rings, that this here would have changed everything if that kind of strength was coming forth from the north,
available to Sauron,
to destroy Dale again, to destroy King Dane again, even to destroy the dwarves of the Blue Mountains, like that would have been the end of everything. I just love that whole retcon, like right there. And then the retcon of, it's a chance meeting, if chance you call it.
Yeah.
I was meant to meet him there.
You're the subtext.
Yeah. And that's the theme of this.
Yeah, it is funny. Like, Gandalf is still Gandalf. He says, one of the funniest parts that I think you and I even mentioned at one point in the years past, but because Gandalf quotes himself at the beginning, he says that in that far distant time, I said to a small and frightened hobbit, Bilbo was meant to find the ring and not by its maker, and you therefore were meant to bear it. And I might have added, and I was meant to guide you both to those points. One of the funniest parts about that, when you go back and read that from Lord of the Rings, is that there's this phrase that, like, Frodo's pushing Gandalf on what's going on here and this great plan. I mean, this what hope do we have? And Gandalf says, I can say it no plainer than this. Bilbo was meant to find this. So that's the phrase before. Yeah. And that was always hilarious, because it's like, really? You can say it no plainer than this? How about saying there is a God who's looking over that? Like you are you sure you can't say any plainer than that? But Gandalf is really reluctant to talk about the higher and deeper metaphysical things, which is why he says, like, I was a lower end, but I'm not going to talk anymore about that except to those people who were in the far west. And then he says, Gimli still pushes him and says, well, why did you do all this? Like, when you were an old gray man as you appeared, why did you put all this thing together? And that's the beginning of the story. And Gandalf says something hilariously silly. I mean, it's silly in one sense. It's just very Gandalf-like. Why you should want to know that, I do not understand, said Gandalf. But I had, of course, simple reasons for what I did. And if I may say so, hobbits were not at first very important among them. It's his first sentence that I'm concerned about. Why you should want to know that, I do not understand. Do you really, Gandalf? You don't understand the peoples of Middle-earth? You don't understand why they should... Like, Gimli's asking a very natural question. It's very natural to wonder, oh, Gandalf, you were the architect of this whole thing in the first place. Why did you do this? Why did you set this all in motion? How did you know that these things would come about? And he's like, I don't even know why you want to know that.
All's well that ends well, right?
What?
Like, why?
What are you talking about? Of course, anyone with the brain would want to know that. Everybody wants to know that. Like, how did it come to you? What's going on? And he just has this very sort of, like, no one should ever ask questions about the deeper, wider things and purposes. Just trust me, it was all good.
Or
worked
is it
out
more,
fine.
Yeah, but is it more saying, like, why would you want to know that when there really is no answer to that question? Like, I can't answer that. Like, why would you want to know what can't be answered? It's sort of like trying to know the mind of God, right?
Okay. If he had said that would be different. But he said, why you should want to know that, I do not understand. What? He doesn't understand curiosity of a rational mind? Like, we want to understand why things happen the way they do. So Gandalf very well understands why Gimli would want to know. What he's going to be coy about is, what Gandalf is like a little bit Gandalfy about, is that it turns out...
Gandalfy, that's... Yeah. You're being so Gandalfy, Michael.
It turns out, because that is Gandalf. Being Gandalfy, there's a lot of ways to be Gandalfy, by the way. I'm very Gandalfy in my temper sometimes, as my children will remind me. But one of the ways that you can be Gandalfy is you don't have full mastery of all the causes yourself, and so you're irritated when people push you to answer those things. Like there's things that you understand that they can't understand, and also there's things that you don't understand yourself, and you don't want to talk about them. Gandalf is he loves the cloak of mystery over things. That's what I mean by Gandalfy. Like he's an agent,
circumspect about everything.
Very circumspect, and it's almost insulting for you to ask him too many questions about what the causes are.
Right.
And,
it's sort of like I mean the Bilbo plan in the same way, right? When he's trying to convince Thorin of it, he's like, here's the deal. You will die if you do not take him. It will fail. Right? That's it. I'm not going to explain it to you, but this is what's going to happen. Now, you could say that's from what was behind his waking mind again, that he didn't have a plan really, but he just knew. But that's sort of like this too, right? Like he just why should you want to know that when I just knew? That's it. That's the only answer. Like I have no other response to it. And he could have said that, true. But maybe he as Gandalf the White, maybe his response was like, well, you should just know this. This is obviously right. I know this.
Or
you should know this.
I mean, look, if he's even going to say things like there are some things that are mysteries that we can't know, that they come from powers and purposes that we don't have clear picture of, and yet those purposes and powers tend to our good. They are good because they look after us in a providential manner. And so just accept the fact that there's someone good looking after you, a purposer. Looking. Yeah. So he could have said something like that, but no, it gets very irritated when people want to question him beyond the level that he's comfortable explaining. And that level that he's comfortable explaining is really surface level. Like Gandalf does not like getting into the deeper things most of the time.
Yeah. Well, they just like on the horse ride to Minas Tirith from Rohan, right? Like he got a little tired of all those questions. He's like, maybe he's had it up to here and he's kind of done at this point anyway. So
even Gandalf the White. Exactly.
Yeah. All right. I think that covers it, man. It's a really interesting chapter. I mean, he retcons Dol Guldur. He retcons Bilbo, who the Hobbits are. He talks about them being like 1,400 years ago, right? Like that's when we essentially first have the Hobbits. He retcons all these little facts that we would have wanted to know from the Lord of the Rings into the Hobbit now, and I just love it. It's so good.
That's great. He even throws in some hobbitry, like that curious, that hilarious, peculiar Hobbit form of humor. So when he's talking about that he's looking for the right kind of Hobbit, so naturally thinking over the Hobbits that I knew, I said to myself, I want a dash of the Took, but not too much, Master Peregrine.
I missed that. Yes.
And it's just like he just takes a swipe at the Tooks, just because that's what you do. That's what you do when you're with Hobbit humor. You poke fun at people.
Yeah. Well, fool of a Took was the phrase. He's like,
exactly.
He's got to make sure that still stands. Like a dash of the Took doesn't mean the fool of a Took, just a dash of a Took.
Not a full-blown fool. We want a dash, just a little bit.
We need to make a T-shirt. Not that we actually will, but dash of a Took, right?
We need, it could just say that. Just say we need a dash of a Took, comma, not a fool of a Took.
Yeah. That'd be great. All right. Well, I think that covers it, guys. If you want to read the longest version of the Quest of Erebor, you have to get the Annotated Hobbit. That's the one way. Is there a Kindle version? I don't know, but you can get this here. You can find a lot of copies of these on eBay. I believe that's where I got mine.
Yeah, it's really, and it was all published with. I mean, he specifically thanks Christopher Tolkien for letting him publish it, because this is the first time that full version has been published is in that book.
Right.
And so it's pretty cool.
And I don't believe it's been published again. This is still in print, but I don't believe it hasn't been put into it hasn't been retconned into Peoples of Middle Earth.
Right.
He doesn't go back and re-edit those Histories of Middle Earth books. He just, when things are found, Christopher Tolkien is no longer with us, but they would be added here, or Christina Skull and who's the other person? Wayne Hammond, right? They're the
right, yeah.
They did the Reader's Companion to the Lord of the Rings. Skull and Hammond. They're the ones who found the Noel poem too, right? They're sort of the new Tolkien scholars who are doing a lot of research, and they were given a lot of access to this. So the new things are always published in separate books. So if you want to get that, if you want to get the Quest of Erebor, you got to get the Annotated Hobbit. But I think it's kind of worth it if you're a big fan to read through it.
Totally, it totally is. And if I dare say so, I think this is I loved rereading this because in a very small way, what Tolkien is doing here is similar to what in their hubris, the people that wrote Rings of Power thought that they were doing. Tolkien is going back to his own work, and he's saying, let me fill in some gaps on what happened that the reader should know about, and let me tell a little story. And so he does so for 10 pages. He tells a missing piece of things that his original tale doesn't cover. His original two tales of The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings don't cover. Yeah. And so, but the way that he does it is so much in the spirit of his world, and so much the character of Gandalf, and has such that high and perilous trait to it that he wanted to restore, that Gandalf wanted to restore qualities that he wanted to restore the love of in the Hobbits. That I think that if when people go and try to retcon Tolkien's things in whatever way, whether that retconning is filling in gaps and telling a story that Tolkien hints at and doesn't flesh out, they would do well to, I think, look to this rewrite, this retconning that Tolkien did himself of his own work, and take their inspiration from that. There's no changes in theme. He doesn't naysay any of the spirits.
Characters.
No, his characters don't change. Now, the only thing you could say changes is there is a maturation of the dwarves of the Hobbit, and they become more high and perilous. And I keep using that phrase because I love it. I think that's the best phrase from this. What Gandalf was trying to do with the Hobbits, which is reinstill that love of what's high. That is what Tolkien is doing with the Lord of the Rings. He wants to reinstill the love of the high and the perilous to the people who read it, and to write an English epic in that register. And so I just think that for people that are looking to fill in gaps on Tolkien, which I don't think Tolkien, like if they do it in the right spirit, I don't even think Tolkien would have minded some of them, but he would have hated what Rings of Power did and what the modern corporations are doing, because they just have no ability to do it well.
Yeah, because they can't retcon Entwives into the Rings of Power properly.
Oh my gosh!
Remember that? So they do all that sort of stuff. That's how they retcon things. But what we're going to do is, like, Tolkien didn't retcon everything.
Have brought that up.
No, I'm sorry. I thought we could get an episode about Rings of Power, but no, Michael, you brought it up. Usually I'm the one.
Fail.
So what we're going to do is, in our extended edition, which you can, of course, guys, get by going to thewonder.com/member, thewonder.com/Patreon, we'll talk about the other things Tolkien should have retconned, perhaps, through the Quest of Erebor, into the Lord of the Rings more, maybe even an extended novella that we can go here. Like, this here could be made into a longer novella. You know what? And also reading this, I just want to say, this is clearly where the movies got the dwarves from. Like, they try to make Thorin this angry dwarf, as angry as he is here, because all we see is angry Thorin in this here, and that's all we get in the films. So this is clearly where they got it from. But we're going to talk about, like, maybe things like, should there have been more orcs from Gundabad retconned into this? Bjorn.
How about Bjorn?
Yeah, the stone giants.
Yep.
The Tralalalali elves. Because, I don't know if you saw the extended edition of An Unexpected Journey, the first Hobbit movie, where they somehow retconned in dwarves in a elven fountain bathing naked. That was fun. I don't know. That's not a retcon. That's just a stupid decision.
No, that's just perversion on more than one level, actually.
Wait, he didn't mention that in The Hobbit at all?
Uh-huh.
That wasn't in there? You sure?
No. Or Radagast covered with a face full of crap the whole time.
Yeah, no, that wasn't in there either.
Or
sure that wasn't in there? 100%?
Or large rabbits pulling a sled.
Those aren't rabbits. Those are hares.
Hares. Sorry, my bad.
I don't know if they are, but we'll go on.
My
anyway,
bad. I don't care about.
Yeah, well, join us in the extended edition, guys. We'll see you on the other side. And Happy New Year. We're going to be going into. This is our last episode of The Hobbit, Michael. Moment of silence. Okay, good. The crazy thing is, guys, you can just re-listen to it, or actually just read the book again, so it's not really over. It's actually wonderful. You can go back over and over and over again. But now we're going to be getting into some more film changes. We're going to be doing a few of those every couple weeks. And And we'll be then jumping into the Children of Hurin at some point after that. Not sure exactly when, but definitely getting into some more real hardcore Tolkien.
From fairy story into deep tragedy. Yeah.
That's right. A lot of fun. All right, guys. We'll see you on the other side.
All right. Take care, freeloaders.
Did you think it would end this way? Oh, the journey doesn't end here. The grey rain curtain of this episode will be rolled back, and all will turn to silver glass. And then you hear it. Distant sounds like waves on diamond shores. A far greater episode under a swift sunrise.
Oh, hey, I forgot.
Oh, what?
No, I didn't actually forget. Never mind. We did say that earlier. So, this is what you guys hear behind the scenes. It's like, no, wait. Oh, no, we did make those corrections earlier. Didn't we? Did we make the corrections, or was that before we talked?
The corrections.
Oh, we didn't talk about the corrections to the. Yeah, did we? Let's see. No, there's the corrections to the last episode.
We did not. We did not mention them.
So here, for you extended edition people,
we're going to tell you where we got wrong.
Yeah. So clearly, we talked about selling things
totally
for
human.
a song. Tolkien wrote this in the last chapter as Bilbo approached his home where things were being auctioned off. Tolkien wrote, most of the things had already been sold for various prices, from next to nothing to old songs, which we clearly missed because the phrase is selling something for a song means selling something for almost nothing. And so, but the way that Tolkien put it is from next to nothing to old songs. It was like, okay, I see it now. But man, we were talking about, like, we just couldn't get out of our heads into hearing the
we talked on for a couple of minutes. But to be fair, like you said, Tolkien isn't saying it the way that we say it, which is a very Tolkien thing to do.
True.
He's introducing a phrase which he's hinting to you as the reader that this might have been where that phrase that you know about came from.
Yeah.
And so to be to our credit, also to our credit, I'm going to double down and say I could see Hobbits selling things for a old song. I could see them actually like, ooh, that's a cool old song. That's worth a silver spoon. Sure.
Yeah.
So
anyway, those words, I'm going to want to remember them and tell them to my kids. I'll buy that.
Yep.
And then also we talked about Bilbo not having any handkerchiefs because he left home without handkerchiefs. But there's one line, simply 7 words, and after Gandalf had rode up on his very splendid white horse, Tolkien writes, he had brought a lot of pocket handkerchiefs. So he did have handkerchiefs. Gandalf brought them to Bilbo in Chapter 2 in Roast Mutton, so we missed that too. So there you go. Smartest
that one,
listeners.
I have no excuse for. Our bad. We missed that sentence.
I could have looked it up better, but you know what? I like pretending I'm no, I don't actually.
No.
We learn a lot from the people who listen to us. So there's some folks out there who are
tell us where you made mistakes,
holding our feet to the fire. All right,
keep us honest.
So let's talk about retconning. If Tolkien in the way, let's assume that he had done more in The Hobbit when he did a rewrite, and perhaps he had incorporated more of the Lord of the Rings into this story of the Quest of Erebor, where he talked perhaps about Bjorn more, and it was more of a novella rather than just a fly on the wall kind of overhearing of a discussion, which is kind of what the Quest of Erebor is. How, in what ways, perhaps, could Tolkien have retconned? Say, let's start with stone giants. If there was a way where Tolkien had said these stone giants. Because you would say, okay, there, if this was written after this, right, became a novella, and he would be telling Thorin essentially like, look, you're going to encounter things dangerous and perilous, and you'd better be prepared. And then he says he recalls perhaps going across Caradhras and how perhaps the stone giants that were there may have had a hand in things like maybe that. I don't know. I just pulled that out. But that would be a way where he could have mentioned retconning stone giants into the Lord of the Rings too.
That's true. You could have had Legolas and Gimli talk about when they traveled to Rivendell. They would have had to pass through the lands that were now peopled by the descendants of Bjorn. And so they could have talked about. It wouldn't have been Bjorn himself because I think it's too long after that. or how long after 70 years? Yeah. So yeah, it wouldn't be Bjorn, it would be Bjorn's son, but or his grandson, who knows. But they could have talked about their dealings with the people of that land, the woodsmen of that land that were then ruled by Bjorn and his descendants. So that would have been a fun connection. He also, in the appendices, could have mentioned Bjorn coming to the aid of the elves of Mirkwood when Sauron throws forth his might from Dol Guldur. So Bjorn could have, or Bjorn's descendants could have showed up to help the elves against Dol Guldur, which is one of Sauron's armies in that we only hear about in the appendices.
Or he could have been that Bjorn's, what did he call him? Bjorn's, not army, like a community. He was building up a city. There was a word he used, I think, in the Son of the Last.
I don't remember.
In any case, all right. Perhaps he and his men fought back against the orcs of Gundabad and kept them from joining the army too, right? That they played a pivotal role in making sure keeping the northern armies at bay as well from joining up with any southern armies by taking all their possible might. And Bjorn gets a little berserky, right? Perhaps there's a little berserker in all of them, which means you don't care whether or not you die and you just go whole hog into the battle. And they were able to fight the orcs and keep them at bay. I like that too.
He could have mentioned things like the interesting that you mentioned the orcs of Gundabad. Extension of the orcs of Gundabad could have been considered like the orcs of the Misty Mountains, for example, because that's on the direct line down from Gundabad.
True, yeah.
And they had talking. I mean, they spoke with each other. The death of the Great Goblin meant that the orcs of the Misty Mountains were leaderless for a while, but they could have the whole situation with the Balrog going down could have created a rift, and then their defeat at the hands of the elves of Lothlorien when they tried to follow the ring, because there's a bunch of skirmishes and battles around Lothlorien that they lose.
Did the elves of Lothlorien go to Helm's Deep? Oh no, wait.
No, they did not. No, I'm talking about when the orcs from the Misty Mountains from the orcs of Khazad-dûm are following the company after the death of Gandalf and the Balrog.
Right.
And they enter Lothlorien and are destroyed. And so maybe those were the part of the armies of Gundabad that had come down. And that
now, do you think that would happen before or after Gandalf arrives in Lorien after his resurrection?
That would be after. Before, because it's before the company. Because those orcs are destroyed while the company is resting in Lothlorien.
Yes, right. Oh.
So it's because they were there for weeks.
See, all these things you could do in a movie that would totally be 100% proper within the world of that Tolkien created, and still.
How about the wild worms of Arrakis that showed up? Yeah, never mind.
Yeah, I didn't even want to bring those up. That was not well, how about the spiders in Mirkwood? I mean, you could say Tolkien was kind of retconning them a little bit, but he already had spiders were like a major thing. Like you had the spiders of what mountains were those in Beleriand where nobody wanted to cross them?
Oh boy, I can't remember.
Yeah,
there were
of the
they were the mountains above the Thingol's forest.
Right.
The Thingol and Melian's forest, and I forget the name of them.
In any case, so spiders should there have been more of a, like, he could have talked about how the elves of Mirkwood were fighting against the spiders because they were being called by Sauron back because of Shelob and her progeny, maybe? I don't know.
Okay. Yeah.
Something along those lines. Not the young Shelob that we got in the Rings of Power, because that's essentially what they did. That was so bad. But the talking about the battle that was waged there between the spiders and the elves, finally trying to drive the darkness out of Mirkwood that Sauron had been creeping in, because those spiders came maybe because of Dol Guldur and the small power, and they've been growing in power, and that on Gandalf's return, he had a discussion with Thingol about, that things are not going to get any better. We already know that Sauron is gaining power, and you're going to have to do your part. And these spiders are a big problem, and you're not going to want to fight them when they come at you. You're going to want to go at them first. Maybe something along those lines.
Yeah. I mean, like that kind of a cleansing. Yeah. That would be fun.
That'd be good.
Nandungortheb is the name.
Nandungortheb. Why? It's not in this map here that I'm looking at. Oh no, there it is. Yes. Oh man, I would love a story about that. Anyway, and then the hardest one to retcon completely are the Tralalalali elves. What do you do with Tralalalali elves?
Well, actually, so I got something for you there. I don't have a fully fledged thought, but I will just point us to the episode we just did and say Tolkien took the dwarves of a fairy story and he retconned them into noble dwarves. So he could have done the same thing with the elves. So the elves of The Hobbit are clearly fey and silly in a way that they often are in fairy stories, but aren't in Middle-earth. And so when Tolkien takes the dwarves and he retcons them, and he even does it in The Hobbit, like the dwarves of the last couple of chapters are of in a higher register than the dwarves in the first in 70% of The Hobbit. So, and the elves do the same thing. Like the elves are first, they're very silly in Rivendell, and then they're just kind of ephemeral and they don't have much personality, but they're still kind of foolish. Like you think of the steward who gets drunk with his guards that allows Bilbo to dump the barrels out. So those are very different kinds of elves from the elves that show up at the end. And the king of the elves is always talking in a high register to Bilbo and to the dwarf, to the Men of Dale and the Long Lake. And so I think if Tolkien had done so, he could have retconned those elves in a couple of different ways. First of all, the Tralalalli elves could be elves that are either young from an elvish perspective, or that are sheltered in some way. In other words, they're not the elves. Like the Elven Society, it could have been a part of the Elven Society which was either has just been the part that has never gone out to war. Like remember, elves live forever.
That's what Rivendell is, right? It's
exactly. It's the haven that we're
sheltered.
Exactly. It's much more so than Lothlorien. Lothlorien is kind of in the heart of the edge of the defense of the good. But Rivendell is on the other side of the Misty Mountains. It's very hidden. It is a place that is that basically it isn't built for war. There aren't, unlike in the Lord of the Rings, we see that there are like orc patrols marching on the edges of Lothlorien, and then they have to be opposed. And Lothlorien goes to war at the end of. We only hear about the details in the appendices, but it goes to war at the end of the Return of the King as well in the final battles. But Rivendell doesn't. Isn't besieged. At least I don't think so, unless I'm misremembering. So I think you could have had a part of the elves that are just sort of true to this old and sheltered elf. Remember that the elves of Beleriand, they didn't even know how to make weapons. Some of them, they were very simple people, and they had a love of the world, the natural world, and singing and dance, and they were. It was a very fey, just sort of fairyland kind of, but the high elves were different. The Noldor were different, and then they taught the elves of Middle Earth to be different and to be able to go to war. So I think this could be a remnant. So I think Tolkien could have retconned it that way. What do you think?
I think that Toriel came over with a case of wine and got them all a little tipsy,
drunk. Yeah,
and and they don't slur their words. They just start singing a little too often.
Right.
And they're
So you're just saying these are party elves?
they're just party elves. Yeah, there's party elves getting high. No, I think this is the hardest thing to retcon. I like the idea of them being young elves and being sheltered elves. I think that makes the most sense. Because it is on their entryway, and so they're out playing essentially, is sort of like what's happening. And so you would accept, like, by young, I mean really young. I mean, like, but then again, how many young elves really are there? And are elves really that young?
Well, elves are still having. They're not like elves aren't having children. But their connection to the Middle Earth is fading. That's why they need to go to the West.
Right.
So there are young elves. But just like a dwarf too young to wield the weapon would be 24 years old, like Thorin. An elf too young to interact with the world might be like 100. Who knows?
True. Yeah. I like that. I mean, it might only be like 2 or 3 elves. Like, we don't really know. It could be just a few of them.
A group of young elves just singing to them.
And maybe it's mob mentality. When there are enough of them, some of the older elves start joining them up too. And then you get them waking up Bilbo in the middle of the night when he's snoring.
That's true. I'm reminded of Monty Python and the Holy Grail. On second thought, let's not go to Camelot. It's a silly place.
That's what that would be a great parody of Rivendell. Like, when on the way back, when they're like,
let's not stop by Rivendell. It's a silly place.
That's right. And it kind of was. Although, as you pointed out, I think it was you who said this, is that Elrond was not silly. He was not silly. He didn't do silly things. He didn't belittle them. He didn't sing songs about how everything is greater here and why in the world would you go and fight a dragon when look at how great our world is right here. Yeah. So yeah.
No, he's got the. I mean, he's a high elf. I mean, half high elf, but
right
in the way choices work with half elves, he's an elf. He's not a.
That's right.
You're either an elf or a man.
He's 100% elf.
Yeah. Yeah, and then you have, I mean, Glorfindel is the same way. You have elves that are what's interesting is there's even elves. I think there's a couple of elves in the Council of Elrond, like Erebor, that they say kind of dumb things. They say like the kind of naive anyway. They say a couple naive things, which you'd think that a creature that's lived in Middle Earth for like thousands of years would, or hundreds anyway, would know better. But apparently I think elves can be really sheltered. I think they can lose themselves in their love of the world, right. and centuries can pass and they can grow very little in terms of their ability to deal with suffering and evil. And so they can appear very silly. So I think that's I'm with
you on that.
The way Tolkien could have retconned it.
Yeah. Clearly, Tolkien ran out of time and would have done more if he could have. I know, he did what he could in order to tie The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings together. And his biggest disappointment was still nobody was interested in writing the Silmarillion. So he felt like these were probably things he had to do in order to make things work, because he couldn't leave the story alone and say like, no, we've got to make this work. But he still just really wanted to publish the Silmarillion, so he ran out of time. And much as we would have liked to see, the rewritten version of The Hobbit that he did in 1960, we did get a few chapters of it to kind of see where that tone was going. And I think it's sad. I wish I would have been able to read that. But man, can you imagine the arguments around that story?
Yeah,
that would have been like nuts to see people like that's not the real Hobbit. The original Hobbit's the real Hobbit. Nope, this is what the guy. It would have been like the special editions of Star Wars, essentially, where people are like, dude, that's not Jabba the Hutt. You can't do. No, he's not going to be slithering around as a bad CGI character in the middle of Mos Eisley. Anyway. But I'm glad we did get that and we got the hints of that, guys. I hope you enjoyed this whole long 1.5 year reading of The Hobbit. We'd spent longer on The Hobbit than we did the Silmarillion. Granted, we paused for the Rings of Power and a couple other things, and we are doing 2 a month now instead of 4. But it is 38 episodes on The Hobbit, and we did 37 on the Silmarillion, in case you were curious. So we're pretty consistent. I don't think we're going to get 37 out of the Children of Hurin, but who knows? We'll find out.
We could fall into deep depression and just keep going.
Keep going. 4th chapter today.
Exactly.
Hurin's
it's a sad story.
He's with his
all
sister.
All
wife
is still
now.
dark.
Right. Oh man, that'd be great. All right, guys. Well, we'll catch you in another couple of weeks. Thanks for listening. Thanks for enjoying it. And hopefully, I'll have seen you on the Monday night yesterday when this comes out. So take care, everybody.
Take care, all. Bye-bye.